All right, so if y'all don't mind, if you would take each of you, we'll start here with Sandy, or I'll go first, and we'll just go down, quick introduction. My name is Chris Peterson. I'm the founder and president of a company called Vector Firm. Vector Firm is a sales and marketing consulting and training business, and we work with system integration companies. And I'm simply moderating today. Three of these folks here are going to be giving you the content and the intelligence. So Sandy, if you would give a quick introduction.
I'm Sandy Fisher. I've been with Inovonics for 30 years. I've been a sales engineer for just about 1 year now. And just for perspective, my world would pertain to alarms, both Berg and panic, primarily in commercial.
Very cool. My name is Smaly Viloria. I'm with Lynx Systems. Been with the company for over 3 years. And we're a manufacturer based out of Dallas, Texas, focused on networking, IP, duress, and mass notification.
And as solutions engineer, what is that like a sales engineer?
Yes, that's correct.
My name is Damon Standish. I'm VP of Customer Success for ICT. We're a manufacturer of access control and intrusion detection systems. 30-year veteran of the industry, and I've been in many different roles, including sales engineering.
Very good. And sales engineering is in your group? Yes. Beautiful. All right, so this first question, I'm gonna ask each of you to provide feedback, and then from there, we're just gonna take it how it flows, and we won't go down the line. But I think this first question is important to get input from each of you. How has the role of sales engineers changed in your organization over the last 3 to 5 years, and what does the evolution look like? Damon, we'll start with you down to the...
Sure. Yeah, I think just broadly speaking, sales engineer role was really about technical validation. It was really about being the expert in the room. Obviously that is still a requirement, but I think how it's broadly changed is that now it's more of a collaborative kind of effort rather than just sitting there to answer questions, right? So works well with the account exec to, tag team and essentially show that we have a solution, not just answers to questions.
And just to follow up on that, the nice part with that as well too is a lot of these deals that are coming in, we're bringing in the IT people in first, and having a sales engineer at the beginning of these conversations is really important and helps drive the sale and move it forward. So instead of it getting stuck in the mud, we do have the opportunity to really find out what those pain points are early and then figure out a solution for them as well.
So early on during discovery.
Exactly.
Okay. Sandy.
Well, what they said, but also the way I would characterize it is it's a role that I've taken on that supports the entire team, the entire sales team, and especially when it comes to not only new product introduction, but with helping to propagate integration efforts between our platform and other platforms.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all. So over the last, we'll call it 30 years, because two of you said you've been around for 30 years, so. Over the last 30 years or so, what I've observed is that customers get their own information today. Customers want to get their own research and do their own research, and basically, and I'm really simplifying this isn't exactly how it happens, but they want salespeople to provide a price. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to do the research, I'm going to provide a price. And where before it was the sales, meaning 30 years ago, the salesperson was out there to build those relationships, and they had a sales engineer to provide the technical competence. Today, customers are like, if you're just here to build a relationship, I don't need you. So the salespeople have had to become more competent. I think that's why a lot of you raised your hand for both. I'm a sales engineer and I have a number, right? Because you've got to have that competence. So where the sales engineer has gone, that I've seen, is they're a more strategic, more high-level thinking person than just the person next to the salesperson answering questions. And Damon, I'd love to hear your input on this, because you've been a sales engineer and you're leading sales engineers, and you've seen this kind of evolution. What challenges have sales engineers had going from being that, maybe even thinking they were hired to just answer questions for the salesperson, to now you've got to be more of a strategic thinker, more part of that collaboration that y'all mentioned earlier?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a tough thing to learn. I think it's one of those skills that you can develop over time, but it's really a big shift from just that technical knowledge to, like you're saying, it's more strategic thinking, but it's about getting to the outcomes rather than just answering technical questions, right? So that is a mindset shift, definitely, and it is, yeah, it's a tough thing for existing sales engineers out there. So, yeah.
Is there a skill to look for?
You know, I think part of it is actually being able to listen and truly listen, and that would be one of the skills that I would be looking out for in a new sales engineer, right? Difference being, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You actually want to be the one that can listen and understand and then be able to come to a solution rather than just, again, answering those technical questions. Yep.
Very good. And as a solutions engineer, Smaly, I'm curious, do you see that, yeah, we talked about skill, is there a confidence issue, do you think? Because some sales engineers, they're like, hey, I'm an engineer, but I want to be in front of people, right? But now you're asking me to be more strategic thinking, more, more collaborative with other executives, things like that. Is there a confidence thing there?
Well, then it really depends on the actual individual themselves. I mean, from my personal experience, I consider myself to be really outgoing, so it helps when I'm having these conversations with executives. And it's always good to like ease the room, because when you're in that discovery phase, you want to really listen, like Damon was saying earlier, just to what they're trying to get out of that system, and obviously help them get across that finish line, you know. And we also understand that some of these projects, unfortunately, do take a while, so keeping that engagement with them throughout the entire sales process is really important as well, too. So if they have a question, do your research, try to get an answer back to them within 24 hours, and it shows them that, hey, I care, and I'm trying to help you succeed to close this, close the sale, and or give you a solution for your end user as well, too.
So I'm going to ask this question of the group, and then I'm going to ask it of y'all. So as they're answering, think if you've got a good answer. But what are some common mistakes, or a common mistake that you might have seen a sales engineer make as they're making that evolution from, hey, I'm just supposed to answer questions for this person over here, to no, you are driving this solution set, you're driving this relationship. Any mistakes that y'all have seen out there? Any examples?
Maybe jumping into the technical a little too quickly, understanding what the needs are of the end user, what they're trying to accomplish first, and then tailoring your response to help them meet those objectives.
Did y'all hear that? Yeah, that's that's so hard. I mean, I talk all the time. Keep the solution in your back pocket, because no matter, and I can sit there during training and tell somebody that, and it doesn't matter. You can tell them keep the solution in your back pocket, and 15 seconds later they're telling you the solution, because it's hard. It's hard not to share the knowledge you have. What else? What other mistakes might?
Yeah, I think the tendency to jump down rabbit holes and get too detailed is something that I see happen quite frequently. But that's why when I'm coaching, I tend to just come back to that same thing of shut up and listen, but truly listen to understand, not to just be quiet and think of the next thing to say, right? Yeah. So yeah, back to the mistake, it's just simply going too far down that rabbit hole, and maybe overcomplicating things is another thing that I tend to see happen too.
Yeah, when just jumping off of that, you know, I try to keep it really, really simple when it comes to the solution itself. So and the way I see it, and I try to explain it to people as if they're in the 5th grade, right? Just very, very dumbed down. And it's not that I'm not taking away from the technical aspect, but it's just that when you're in a room, you may have one really technical person, and then everyone else is a higher executive. So you have to really give a good answer that everyone's going to understand. And now, if they do want to get technical, you let them bring that into the field at that point in time. So again, I try to keep it super high level, not super detailed, but if the question does arise, then I could get nerdy.
How do you make sure that, because usually a technical person in the back is thinking, man, that's a dumb answer, Smaly, you haven't gotten any details, and then they usually won't tell you that.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure you fulfilled them?
So normally it's towards the end of the conversation, I would try to bring up something technical that I know that's going to pique their interest. So say, for example, I'll bring up the fact that, you know, our company is SOC 2 compliant. And once I say that, their ears turn on and say, oh, but what else are you guys complying with? And then I'll go through the list of things that we do and how we could support them as well too. So again, it's a conversation of just keeping it as simple as possible, but if the technical question does arise, then you're at least well prepared to give the correct answer and help them get to the finish line. So.
Any stories? Any examples of, hey, this person did this one time, and it just was an awful example of how, a sales engineer at that more strategic level should be working? I've got one. We actually promoted him and brought him into a pretty large client, but this is 20 years ago, 18 years ago. Brought him in to see a client, and I think he was overly excited, and he was smarter than the customer, and within 20 minutes, everyone knew it, and he made the customer look stupid. Therefore, we never saw the customer again. And it was blatant. And by the way, that wasn't done. In fact, that sales engineer is here at this event still 18 years later, and he's fantastic at what he does. He was just young and learning. And he didn't do that in a way that was facetious. He did it, he didn't know any better. He thought he was supposed to be the smartest person in the room and share it, at that level, because in his previous role as simply an application engineer, that was his job, right? And now it's like, no, now you're meeting with the executives. You can't necessarily do that. Sandy, I'm curious, helping sales, you mentioned it, uncover those real pain points, right? Not just the technical pain points, but the business pain points, heck, the personal pain points. That can be, coming from a sales engineer's perspective, that can be very helpful for the salesperson and the customer. Do you use any specific questions or frameworks in that discovery process?
Well, sure, and my the perspective I like to take is from physical security planning. And when you create a model, you can, through the process of critical thinking, take a question or supposition, crank it through that model, and evaluate what comes out in a consistent manner. So the model I use is with security planning, there's 4 pillars, and that really makes up my discovery. It's starting with, it's threat and risk. And those are 2 separate concepts. We often use them interchangeably in conversation, but threat being the bad thing that can happen, risk being the result of a threat having occurred. So in my discovery process, it starts with threat identification, then threat assessment, then risk assessment, and risk management, which is typically risk mitigation. That's the name of the game. So I make sure that I uncover that before jumping into the suggestions for product mix.
And you it's as simple as following that flow. It's as simple as following that flow of questions.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great. You guys have anything similar, or?
Normally, when it comes to any type of deals that we're brought into, I try to look at what they're currently using and then try to see what they like about it and how I could help them continue using that system, because in my role, I'm just building a solution for them, and I'm also the salesperson. So it's like I'm 2 in 1 at that point in time. Right. But the whole purpose why I try to at least uncover a lot of things in the beginning, and then say, all right, cool. So let's try to look at all of the things that you guys are currently doing right now, what can improve, and what has been missing in this time frame as well too. And then that's when the recommendations of technology starts coming up within that conversation as well too. So as long as I know what they're interested in, I'm not going to try to oversell them. Why? Because I want to make sure that they're getting what they need and not overpaying as well too. Because again, you want them to come back and buy more from you and continue buying more from you in your company as well too. So if you do it right the first time, you do not have to re-dig again and shovel it out and find other information from them as well too. So.
Yeah, I think part of discovery really focusing on the business outcome that they're looking for is a really good way to do it as well. So before you go anywhere near the technical solution, as you're saying, that kind of comes at the very tail end of everything. It's really truly understanding what does success look like for the customer, right? And that can go as far as getting into personal success for the individuals that you're dealing with as well, right? So asking those simple questions that prompt a discussion around, what they're actually trying to achieve, not not digging too much into the technical side of it, right? So what does success look like for a school district? Oh, geez, that's actually a really bad example. Let's not go there. Yeah, but you understand where I'm coming from, right? So it's really just making sure that you understand not just the business needs, but the individuals that you're talking to as well. How can we make them look good? What does success look like for them?
Yeah, that's perfect. We have a thing, we call it good, better, and best, and meaning discovery questions. The good discovery questions are technical, the better are business, and the best are personal. And if you can drive to that personal level, you're in business. I'm curious, with that said, do you work with the salespeople ahead of time? Do they know this sometimes beforehand? Have they done their jobs?
Absolutely.
Or as a manufacturer, has the dealer done their job perhaps?
Exactly, and having that huddle before you start, and if you're leaving that to, in the lobby outside the meeting room, it's way too late. Like, this needs to be a discussion that everybody's on the same page up front and, know who's speaking when. Obviously, you got to be able to pivot because you can't control everything, but, having a good, clear picture of who's taking which types of questions and how you're going to drive it is really important.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to our dealers, I try to make sure that I give them a pre-checklist almost, just so that I help them make their job that much easier. Those questions and things that they're just trying to look for, details that I want them to discover beforehand, so that when we do get to a presentation, it's easy for me to point out the highlighted levels of, all right, this is something that they really want to try to accomplish. Here's what their business needs are, and what makes this solution unique, because you have to understand not every sale is going to be the same. I mean, we could have 3 manufacturers or distribution centers, for example, all right next to each other, and they all have different needs at that point in time, right? And having a pre-checklist on what to expect or what to discover really just helps not only the account executive, but also the sales engineer as well too, because now you guys are on the same page and you could go attack it correctly and not waste anyone's time as well too.
So I'm going to go to one more quick question, and then I'm going to ask at this point if there are any comments or questions from the group. We have a small enough group where we can just have almost an open conversation here instead of a panel and an audience. So sales engineers and Smaly, you brought this up a little bit a minute ago, but sometimes they get too technical with non-technical buyers, and it's all with good intentions. But Sandy, I'm curious, tips, ideas that you have to make sure that when you're doing this, right? Because you're a technical person, so you're going to evolve towards technology. Any tips or ideas you have to make sure that you're talking about complexity, but in a simple way?
Well, certainly understanding who's in the room and tailoring what you're saying to their perspective. I think that's important. And again, just understanding that security is comprised of human-driven policies and procedures supported by technology. So I like to start with the human aspects first. Yeah. So, and we were chatting about this a little bit earlier, not just here's a bunch of panic buttons, you press them when you're under duress and there's going to be an alarm. I like to talk about who are the people who are generating the alarms, under what conditions, and then as well as who is responding and how they're responding. When you talk about that human aspect first, and making sure you're on the same page with your audience, whether it's a couple of people in a room or whatever. Yeah. But then using that information that you've gained to understand what direction to go when you start talking about product mix and the technical aspects.
And their roles, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I am curious, what do you do if, and this isn't just for Sandy, this is for the group, what do you do if you have 3 people in a room and it's a very technical person, and it's an executive, and it's let's say a facilities or security manager? What do you do?
Yeah, I think you just have to be prepared with a bunch of different ways of talking to the same thing. Yeah. And that can be as simple as having some real life experience stories that you can, that people are going to relate to. So it's kind of repetition, but it's done in a way that, you know, you're pitching it from different angles that everyone in there is going to understand. So back to that pre-game meeting, this is where one of those, you know, important steps is to find out what we know already about the customer, right? So as a manufacturer, if we're going in with an integrator to, you know, to represent our solution, then first thing is understanding who's in there, right? Now we can have those stories ready to go. And, you know, quite frankly, if they're a little bit stretched, that's fine as long as the answer is actually accurate, right?
Yeah, and going based off of what you just said right now, again, it's how I mentioned it earlier. I try to keep it as dumbed down as possible and as simple as possible because, again, if the technical person who's in the room has a technical question, it's going to arise during the presentation, especially depending on the solution that you're given. Because eventually they're going to sit there and say, how is it going to work on my network? Do I have to open up firewalls? Do I need to get a new switch installed or what have you? And then the security director probably has a completely different question. Does this go to everyone? Who's going to get this? What do I need to do? And then lastly, you know, it's, again, trying to keep it as simple as possible because those questions will then arise within themselves, especially if you present your solution in such a way that it's going to spark an interest or a question behind it as well too. So,
well, here's and this I've always thought that this was unfair. I feel like this is the salesperson's responsibility, but I'm going to throw this question at y'all. The technical person in the back of the room during the presentation just starts to try to show how smart they are, and tries to drag you into a conversation that's going to bore the other 9 people in the room, right? How do you, even though you can answer that question, you know that the next 6 minutes are going to be like stabbing yourself in the eye, right, for the rest of the group. How do you avoid that? What do you do? That's hard, because I believe that's the salesperson's job, to step in and say, hey, you know, Michelle, we'll get you that answer tomorrow. But how do you handle that? Because you're supposed to answer it.
oh gosh, I mean, I sometimes, and this is just me because I guess I'm overly confident, but I just go ahead and I just give them a breakdown, or I try to go do a comparison, you know, just something that it makes sense for people, you know. When I was in telecommunication sales, you know, I had to explain to people what, you know, RAM was or storage or how it worked, and I'm like, okay, imagine you have a car and the trailer behind it is your storage unit. So again, it's giving them a real world example so that they could tie it in and say, oh, that makes sense, okay? But when it comes to those technical questions, you could kind of answer it super right fast and say, great question, let me give you a quick answer, but we're not gonna bore the entire room, but we'll follow up on it. This way you're at least acknowledging them, letting them know that, yes, I heard you, but you're giving them the follow-up then afterwards and saying, hey, we could have a personal conversation on the side, or I could give you the details of what you're asking later on, or as soon as this meeting's over. So
Sometimes I'll look, if it's appropriate, just answer with yes, and I'll explain details later. You know, right. So that, what you said is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good opportunity to build relationships there as well, right? And being exactly that, let's shut it down in a nice way, but immediately after, then go and talk to the right person, right? You're pairing the right people up with the right people.
Damon, you used the word stories a couple times, and boy, you give me a technical person that can tell stories, whew, the sky's the limit for that person in their career. Really, because human beings, we've evolved to where you got to give me an example or a story, or I didn't really hear what you said. You know, textbooks today are written in anecdotes. It's a textbook, so that's great. All right, any questions from the group? Let's hear it.
A comment as an integrator, as an owner. I think a lot of mistakes that we all make is that we take somebody who is really smart as an engineer and say, wow, that's a really smart person. I'm going to make that person a sales engineer. The issue is, just because they're a good engineer doesn't mean that they'll be an excellent sales engineer. The key word being sales. Yeah. And I think people lose sight of that and the importance of that person, that skill set has to be somebody that is very good around customers. Because if you have that dual skill set, they can absolutely be transformative. They're actually more important than the salesperson. But they have to have that duality.
Yeah, do you? I'm curious. By the way, it's an excellent point. Thanks for bringing it up. And I see it. It drives. It's in a sales world. Boy, that person's killing it in sales. Let's put her into management.
Right, yeah.
Probably not a good idea. So, do you have any examples of that dual skill, a skill that fits in that dual threat person that you would look for?
So we do personality profiles.
Oh, good.
So we're not going to put anybody in any role.
What do you use?
We use the DISC.
Use DISC. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's been used. It's been around for almost 100 years. It's very effective.
Yeah. So if they're 99C and 0I, probably not, right?
Not a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so DISC just evaluates what your personality is. It doesn't say whether it's good or bad. It just, and then you have to take those results and say, oh, okay, would that be a good fit for the type of role I'm looking at?
Awesome.
That's a great first pass.
Yep.
And somebody that's like a high C, like you brought up, is going to be very detail oriented, which is wonderful. Those are the types of people you need in technical roles. But if they can't communicate well, then they will absolutely kill your sale.
Or show empathy or listen or any of that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And by the way, when they're in front of all of us, human beings, when we're in front of an audience and the pressure's on, we resort back to that raw personality of who we are. So, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for that. It was a great comment. Any other input, ideas?
Actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
How do you navigate the different types of sales as well as the different types of stakeholders in those meetings? So say you have a GC or, a project manager or the architect, and you have the customer there as well. Because to me, that seems like a different approach than direct to owner, and you have to have the knowledge of what their role is and navigate speaking the language that applies to them, but also you have the end user in the room as well, and I've seen that can be different and a challenge.
Who's taking that one?
Yeah, I'll take that on. I think it comes back to two things. So one is that pre-game meeting. That's important to understand who's in there. But it's about curiosity as well, right? So you want to be asking a lot of questions, and actually it gives you an opening there to get that conversation flowing, right? Even if you know exactly who's there, ask, right? Ask what's important to them, what a good outcome looks like to them. And it's really just about getting that free flow conversation going, I think, right? And just being able to adapt quickly. That's it.
I think being able to pivot really fast while you're having these conversations is super important. And getting stuck is not a problem, because having some type of awkward silence in between, a conversation is not a bad thing. It's actually really, the way I see it, it's giving you time to think at that point in time. But again, to your point, you may have a lot of different stakeholders in there, and some of them are just there because they got brought in just to sit in. I've had meetings that there's people in the call that I'm just like, you're not the decision maker, but you're part of this process some way, shape, or form. So I do have to give you some attention and make sure that you're heard as well too. But being able to pivot I will say is difficult, and it is a skill set that can be trained, but it has to be drilled in, and especially when you're getting into a situation where you do not have that pre-sale meeting, right? And you're just stuck. But again, like Damon was saying, just ask questions. And the more questions you ask, the more information you eventually get out. I mean, it's not going anywhere when they're not answering or they're giving really, really short answers at that point in time. So again, you pivot and you try to look for another way to get that information out.
And the point I would add is also get them talking about how they're going to interact with each other. Maybe there's a plumber and there's an electrician. They might be doing things at different points in time, and you want to make sure they don't interfere with each other. So that's an important aspect too.
Thanks, Eric. That's an excellent question. As a sales engineer, you could be going on and on about how technically cool your solution is, and that electrical contractor is just thinking price, 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 you know, so yeah, great. Anything else? All right, so we've talked a little bit about pre-planning. Are there other strong concepts around collaboration between sales and sales engineers, not just pre-planning, but maybe post-sale, maybe during the process of something, you know, what are some good ideas, good examples of what collaboration between the salesperson and a sales engineer, what does that look like? Sandy, you got any ideas?
Well, one thing I like to do is, and it's typically more early on, but seeing if you can get some kind of a drawing of the site and doing a layout so that the integrators, which are the folks that I deal with, as well as your customers, the end user, can get a good visualization of what the project is going to look like. And then you can take that layout as well and use it as part of a bid package. So that's
great.
Yeah. That's the collaboration I
And just to
I
tie
do the
into
most.
that, and just to tie into that too as well, doing some market research doesn't hurt as well. So you want to try to look at what vertical that you're currently selling to, and then see what other places are doing. That way, it helps you drive that conversation once it's already started. And then when it comes to the post sales, obviously, you know, checking in with them. So what I normally do after a deal is done, I'm checking in with my integrator and saying, hey, is everything good with your deal? Is there anything that you need from me? Do I need to come back in to further explain anything? Or do you need information for our technical support team, right? Because the nice part is with us being a manufacturer is that the dealers and end users have direct contact to us. So I'm gonna provide as much information as I can post sales as well too, so that they are confident to reach out to us. Because keep in mind, once you install something, some people may feel somewhat embarrassed to say, I need help. And I think this is for everyone to even ask for help, but you really just have to get out of your head and just ask. So I do a really good job of making sure that 3 months down the line, I'm checking in again and saying, hey, is everything okay? Is everything good? How can I help you? And what's missing? Right?
As a pre-sales engineer, you do that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Got to take care of them.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point you make there around collaboration, right? Because salespeople do tend to, broadly speaking, throw it across the fence, right? Got us in there, got the meeting, I'm done. Give me my check, right? But if we continue that conversation afterwards, you know, we're building rapport with our own team, but we're also upskilling the sales account exec, right? I think anybody here who has a sales engineer will understand that type of person is really hard to get hold of, really hard to train up properly, and they get stretched thin. So the more we can do to offload some things off them, the better, right? And so really, back to the key point, it's about making sure that you're working as a team and not just throwing it across the fence. Yeah.
So you raise a good point about you know, the limited resources you have, and the comment back there was, if you have a good sales engineer, they can be more important than a salesperson, right? So, and I'd love to hear examples from the audience too. But how do you manage that resource? Let's say you've got 3 sales engineers on your team, but if you had 7, they would still be at full capacity because the salespeople would be using it. How do you manage it? Do you have like a manager that manages your time, or how do you do that?
Well, we've got 1 sales engineer, but there's five salespeople.
And that's you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That's me. And then there's 5 salespeople, and then we have another solution specialist. But this team structure is still fairly new, but so far so good. We've been able to manage those resources, and I step in. You know, I'm usually brought in as a supporting role by each of the 5 territory people.
Okay.
And so we collaborate based on that.
So you haven't been you haven't been at 130% capacity yet, right?
Not yet.
Not yet. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, then my busy work is just me and my integrators. So because they're reaching out to me because they either have questions, they need help with bill of materials or understanding how the product works. And so they're pretty much managing my time. So whenever they want me to be available, I make myself available for them. And I see it in a way of, you know, there is time management, but you also have to be really detailed, because once you're done having that conversation with your integrator or maybe an end user, you still have to follow up with information as well too. So, I mean, just your mundane stuff of like sending an email, doing a follow-up call, you know, it does take up time, but you know, if you're just in meetings all the time and talking to people, you know that you're being busy as well too. So I like that. That's personally that's my happy zone, where I'm just like, I just have meetings back to back to back to back to back, because I know that something's gonna stick, and I know I'm being helpful for my integrators as well too, because again, I'm literally just there for them to help them succeed as well too.
Do you have a process where you're supposed to say no?
Well, the only time I would ever say no if it's not a fit for what we do, for example. And obviously that's part of the discovery questions as well too, because I'm not gonna have a conversation with someone and then realize 3 meetings in and find out that, hey, this is not going to work for you, unfortunately. So just having these discovery questions at the beginning, and also just going through the process of figuring out what they want is helps me out a lot as well too. But very seldomly do I say no, but there are opportunities where it may not be a fit for what we do, but I'm always going to recommend or refer them to someone else. Why? Because I don't want them to waste their time doing research. I will help them do a little bit of research, being a good person and saying, hey, you know what? We're not the fit. You should go check out someone else, and here's their contact information. Reach out to them and see if they can help you. So.
You run the team. What do you do? How do you do it?
We have to say no at times,
You do?
right? And,
Okay.
and this is not just about product. I'm actually talking about your limited resources.
Your people,
right?
right? Yeah.
Exactly. So if the account exec has not done the right amount of qualification, that has to be the first question, right? And if they don't actually know who's in the room, they don't know what the goal is of this meeting, then the answer is no, we're not putting that technical person in there, unless they're bored, which is pretty much never, right?
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. That's a good policy, and it gets your sales. It teaches your salespeople to practice the right practices. Any ideas? Any different things that y'all do to make sure that your sales engineers are not just pulled when they shouldn't be pulled? All right. Any questions? Comment. Love it. Let's hear it.
Please don't step off the stage.
I've been telling myself that about every 4 seconds.
You're
I know.
hanging your heel off the edge so much.
There's still about an 80% chance I'm going to fall off this. Yeah, no doubt about it. So thanks for noticing, though, because someone will come get me when, yeah. All right. Organizational barriers. In your company, are there any, like, what could make your jobs easier? Like, what could your organization do to really free up, you know, or give you a tool or a mechanism to make your job easier?
I think I will answer this one. Having a pre-sales checklist is very important, and it keeps everyone honest. And obviously, it cuts down time when it comes to that discovery call and that meeting as well too. So just have a list of things that you know that you want, and have your sales team or your account executives go through that list first, so that when they hand it off to you, you're like, perfect, I know exactly what we're going to talk about, I know what's at stake, and now let's jump on a call so that we could, dig deeper and figure out how we're going to present this solution to the end user or to the integrator as well too.
Yeah. Why don't you make one?
I did. I haven't released it yet. It's already done, but.
A little side hustle going on here. Huh?
Hey, you know what, man? Everyone's got to work.
That's right. Any, Damon?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a whole other discussion. I'll try not to go too far down the rabbit hole. But I would say start looking at leveraging AI tools, right? You mentioned busy work. Agentic AI, great for taking on that busy work and freeing up some time, right?
I actually do a lot of AI stuff right now. Because some of these sales do get a little complex, and you want to explain it to people in such a way that it makes sense for them. So the best, and again, this is a weird rabbit hole that we could kind of get into. anything that's customer facing, that's what I normally upload into my AI, and I'm like, here's the situation, here's the problem, here's the people who I need to talk to, here's what I want to say, here are my thoughts, and here's the process on how that works. Spit it out. And it gives me a great result, and I'm like, this sounds great and amazing. So I could then send off an email, and it sounds great, you know, and it explains everything as well too. So, I mean, we could talk to people normally, but when you're writing in an email, you're like, does that sound right? Are they going to get the message that I'm trying to convey to them via this thread, right? So.
And who it is I'm sending it to.
Exactly.
Feed that in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Any ideas for any
Well, I found
organizational changes?
Well, what I want to make sure that I do is not cause a distraction when I'm talking to somebody in another department.
Okay.
Because it can be very tempting to go talk to someone in engineering and make all kinds of suggestions, but I know that since the various resources are limited, I want to be sensitive to their time. So I try to trim down whatever it is I'm trying to convey.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So we've talked several times about working with salespeople. I'm curious of an example of when a salesperson did something that really helped you succeed in a particular opportunity. And then, you know what my next question is going to be. Actually, let's start with their bad question. An example of maybe when a salesperson did something that really was an obstacle to you succeeding. Let's start with that, then we'll end on a success one.
I think if they don't know your product very well, for example, or because I work with a lot of integrators, and the biggest hurdle for me is having them understand how our product works and how the solution should be deployed. But there's times that they could put their foot in their mouth and say something really, really silly, and I look like a crazy person then afterwards, because and it probably has happened to you before, and you just sit there with your eyes just wide open, saying, "Oh gosh, I can't believe they just said that," and now you have to pivot and try to save yourself and say, "Oh, you know what? That's great, but here's how it works." And obviously, you have to be respectful towards the person who said it, because you're not trying to put them on the spotlight. You know, it's all about that balance and act of, am I presenting this the right way? Why did you even say that? Let's now bring this back and put us back on the right course. You know, so. But that's probably the only thing that's ever happened to me, and it doesn't happen often because I try to control the conversation as much as I can, right? Because they may say something that does not align with what we do exactly. So.
Got to make sure you're sitting close to them too, like foot distance away, right? No, I mean, it's the same thing. Just as SEs can tend to talk too much and not listen enough because they want to be the smartest person in the room, an account exec can do a similar thing, but it's usually because they want to be the the coolest person in the room, right? So it's that same old thing. Be quiet, listen. That's where it tends to fall off the tracks, right?
You've only been doing this a year, but you've been around longer than a year. So.
One thing that I've seen other people do, and it's helped me make sure that I don't do it, is just to forward an email chain to somebody else without really looking through all of the history of it and scrubbing it to make sure that there's nothing in there that's embarrassing.
That's a good example. Yeah, that's great. All right, how about success? What has the salesperson done that's led to success?
They haven't needed to be kicked under the table. I'm dead serious. It's the most common mistake, right? Yeah. Just knowing when to hand things over, when to just sit down and be quiet is the key. Yeah. Comes back to that pre-game planning, right?
Well, and I think appreciating the difference in the personalities. I had a conversation with a client of ours last week. I did my quarterly visit, and the owner was complaining about their CTO quite a bit and thinking that he may not be the person, right? And And then I actually called him the next day because I didn't think about it on the spot because he was so angry. I said, listen, you have to realize your personalities are totally different. And so I'm going to walk you through an exercise, and the exercise was, when you told him what you needed, was it clear? Was it accurate? You know, and you know, if it wasn't all 4 of these things, your CTO wants to be 100% correct all the time. A sales engineer wants to be right every single time. And a salesperson, the good ones, just want to be right enough to get the order. And really, those are the good ones. And so understanding that personality difference, and why do I need to do a prep sheet? You guys have done this 50 times. What's the big deal? Because you want to be 100% right. And so understanding that personality difference, I think, is huge for a lot of salespeople that don't quite, you know, they don't quite get that. So. Any other stories?
I would say, you know, bouncing off of what you mentioned earlier, as long as they bring us in early to the conversation, that's a success within itself. And also, if they give us good information saying, hey, you know, this is what they're currently using right now, this is why they're not happy, and it makes my job easy so that when I'm giving the presentation, I could stay away from those things, right? So, and again, each vertical is completely different. So it's really just understanding what their pain points are, and then having the integrator at least tell me, say, hey, Smaly, this is what they do not like from what they're using right now. And I'm like, great success story. Now I'm going to push them into the right path to get them across that finish line and get a good solution for them as well, too.
All right. Anything from the audience? Anyone want to brag on a story from a salesperson doing a great? Yes, please, let's hear it.
Not a brag, but I was faced with the manufacturer in a meeting with the client and the sales engineer and the project manager, and the manufacturer didn't understand the scope and was only looking at, you know, that dollar, getting that threshold, getting that sale to meet their goal, and then having to repurpose that conversation and reframe it.
Yeah.
And pull that customer back from what her suggestion is, because she's supposed to be the manufacturer expert.
Yeah.
And not understanding that it wasn't going to work for this application, and then having to pivot off of that, and having a sales engineer there was great, because they were able to say, actually, without saying, no, you're wrong, but this is what I would suggest, and then having that further conversation, but then afterwards, having them call me and say, you know, because she wasn't paying attention, she wasn't listening, she didn't hear the conversation what the customer was asking for, you almost lost your sale because of that.
Yeah.
On a very large
Yeah.
scale.
Was that sales engineer yours or the manufacturer's?
Manufacturers.
Really? Okay. That's good. No, thank you. That's that's common. You know, y'all have to deal with that all the time. You know, because manufacturer the manufacturer salesperson has their number, and that's what they want. So.
And we deal with a lot of direct to owner and service work as well as an integrator. And one thing that I've seen do really well is having your technicians or operations managers in those meetings to understand the intent of, you know, what the customer's wanting, how they want it to function. So you may have sold it, and now it's their job to do it, but having that meeting with that customer can clarify the why
Yep.
behind it, and what the intent is, to make sure that you have a good product at the end of it. I've seen that work really well, at least in our industry, and then also, like you were saying, Smaly, with the verticals, and having that knowledge of the different challenges within each of the verticals. Really helps as well.
Great. Thank you for that example. Anybody else? How salespeople have maybe put you in a bad position or perhaps did something to help you succeed in your collaboration with them? All right. Let's go on to our last question. So if somebody who was an engineer came to you and said, I have an opportunity to be a sales engineer, what advice would you give?
Depends on what I know about that person already, but probably the...
Let's say they're good. Let's say they're competent. They can do it.
Okay.
Okay, they can do it.
Yeah, okay, so if they can do it technically, then the thing they're going to have to master is being able to listen properly, and that's exactly what I do with my guys. I get them in the room and coach them on exactly how to do that.
How do you do that? How do you teach someone to listen?
Well, give a pause. if they start talking,
That's good.
shut it down, right? And then ask for their understanding at the end of a meeting. Just have them sit in on a couple of calls and ask them what they took away from it. And I guarantee you that initially they're just not paying attention to what's actually being said.
Yeah.
Right? Too busy thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say, what's the next feature I'm going to talk about, right? Rather than actually just sitting back and listening. Yeah. So it's something that can be taught. Learning about body language is another thing, right? Understanding who in the room is your detractor and, talking to them, trying to bring them around from this.
That's right.
Which is exactly what you're doing
Yeah,
right now.
that's right. That's right.
To this.
That's exactly right. And it's amazing what happens because when you start reading people, there's a whole story you didn't know was going on before.
Right.
And it's a lot of fun.
I mean, it goes based off of what I would like to tell people: read the room, right? And then reading body languages is really important as well too. But then also being able to think quickly off of your feet to do the next step. Yes, you can get in your own thoughts and get stuck, but it's still nice to know that if you're not confident, we could at least help you get to that point. Sit in a couple calls, do maybe a couple of like mock calls as well too. That helps out a lot. Not sure how often you guys are doing the type of mock trainings, but I would highly recommend it just because it's helpful to get the jitters out, right? Especially if it's your first time.
To do role playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we used to do it all the time in telecom, so it's just because you just don't know what's going to happen. But at least it helps you think on your feet a lot faster as well too.
What advice would you give, Sandy?
Know your stuff, but know that you're not alone. It's always okay to ask. And if there's something you don't know and you find out, that's a learning opportunity, and then you know it.
You're allowed to make mistakes, but just once.
All right, any comments, questions? That wraps up our panel, but I wanted to leave 5 minutes to see if there are any comments or questions from the group. Yes, please.
More of a comment on a question that you just asked when you were asking how do you teach someone to listen better.
Yep.
And I guess this is something that I've been training myself to do very recently and with good success, and that's to keep solutions as a wrap-up for the end of a meeting. The entirety of the meeting should be discovery, should be formulating, should be speaking about issues, pain points, and at the end, I heard it all, I know it all, we can help with A, B, and C and move in that direction.
Yeah.
And I found that has opened up the avenue for more of a conversational meeting versus a Q&A on technology and what we're gonna do for one situation versus another.
Yep. And if it's a 30-minute meeting, you have to remind yourself 4 million times not to bring up the solution, right? It's hard.
I've just been trying to leave it for as long as I can.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's. I kind of want to end on that. That was fantastic. Yes, please.
I come up with a solution after as a follow-up.
As a follow-up.
Yeah. I'm kind of new to the sales world and got kind of thrown into a meeting where the customer had a bunch of questions. I wasn't prepared for that, but it went very well. I didn't come up with any solutions at the time, even though my brain was like, okay, we can do this or that. But afterwards, I
Yeah.
team
Yeah.
and come up with an actual solution or possible solution, and then follow it up with that after the meeting.
No, that's awesome. And did you tease them at all? Did you say, hey, I don't know yet, but I'm going to have an answer and talk to you?
I did, and I was
Okay.
honest with them.
Good.
I said, you know, I've been in the industry for many, many years, but as sales, it's new and it's
Yeah.
a different animal.
Yeah.
So, and they were okay with that.
Yeah.
I think pen and paper helps with that too, right? So asking more questions, writing things down, let the customer say what they need to say. A little bit of awkward silence is fine. It doesn't actually have to be awkward, and it just gives people time to process and you know, just keep asking questions though. That's the key thing, right? If they're asking you for an answer on a particular you know, technical part of the discussion, whatever it is, keep asking questions. Like, get to the root of why they're asking that thing. Don't just answer it, right? And so, yeah, to your point, being able to come back with the solution afterwards makes a lot more sense, right? You've got to be respectful of everyone's time there and make sure you've got a really good understanding of what it is they're looking for, right?
The Toyota, this is going on like 75, 85 years, they came up with this. I think it was just post World War II they came up with this concept, but they call it the 5 whys. You know, you ask why 5 times before you figure out your answer. Now, do you have to do that? No, but conceptually it makes a lot of sense, right? Anything else, folks? Questions, comments? All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks to the panel here. All right. Kim, thanks for having us.